Some dive sites are very beautiful and are also lovely spots for both tourists and researchers. But the Eagle's Nest sinkhole in Florida is none of those things. Even on its surface, it's a very creepy algae pond with a body of water, but that's not all the Eagle's Nest has to offer. Stay with me as we uncover why it is the most dangerous dive site in Florida. Although underwater dives have never been the safest, the Eagle's Nest sinkhole has already claimed the lives of 10 divers since 1981. Many experienced divers have explored the caves, with some even volunteering to contribute to mapping the cave. For Chris Ritten and Patrick Peacock, this was their field of enjoyment. The pair were well experienced and had previously visited the Eagle's Nest sinkhole. However, this time, their fate was going to be different. The pair entered the sinkhole at 2 in the afternoon and were supposed to meet a man at a predetermined spot about an hour later to check the status of their gear and determine if they were to go any further. However, the pair entered the cave late that day, while their safety diver stayed at the surface to be there for them should any problem arise, either at the surface or in the cave. When Blakey, the safety diver, arrived at the designated spot, he didn't find the pair and began to search for them, but to no avail. For over 3 hours, Blakey waited for them to arrive at the spot or return to the surface, but they never showed up. Blakey began to fear the worst. When he was unable to locate his fellow divers, he reached out to emergency services, who immediately sent out a dive team to begin a search. On Sunday, a 20-member search team located the bodies of both Ritten and Peacock together. This dive team consisted of experts and local authorities familiar with the area and the sinkhole. The cave they were entering met little expectation and grave optimism. There is a sign at the beginning of the cave which says, "There is nothing in this cave worth dying for," with a grim reaper image beside it, which makes you wonder why anyone would want to go in anyway. But because Ritten and Peacock had previously challenged the cave and succeeded, they planned to explore the cave for the weekend and discover more paths, but the cave had other plans. During the recovery of their bodies, the emergency task team investigated the scene before retrieval, and according to the county office, the pair made it roughly 1,300 feet into the cave before something devastating happened. It is believed that they got stuck in a narrow opening, and one decided to remove his oxygen tanks. The pair attempted to leave the cave with natural body-breathing processes, but were unsuccessful. The scuba diving gear was left behind and reported as completely functional. Peacock and Ritten were 550 feet from the entrance of the cave, and had already placed spare oxygen tanks outside the cave in case of a catastrophic failure, but this wasn't one. Sadly, the pair were just 550 feet away from safety before Ritten's tank ran out of oxygen, and his friend's attempt to be a hero also cost him his life. It is unknown why Peacock did not attempt to backtrack, as his equipment was still fully functional and intact. Even if he was stuck, investigators believe he could have pushed the gear back through an opening, and Peacock could have restocked, but he didn't, which has left investigators dumbfounded as to what happened. Eagle's Nest is deep, so divers certainly have less time to deal with an issue in a deep cave. There's a varied list of causative factors to accidents, everything from failing to run a continuous guideline, the lines that divers set to help them navigate back to open water, failing to reserve enough gas, the medical problems, the loss of visibility from disturbing sediment on the walls, floor, and ceiling of a cave, and of course people going above and beyond their training and experience. I'm not saying that any of these had any bearing on this accident because I just don't know yet. There will be an in-depth investigation. In mid-August, 4 months into his Florida sojourn, Ben returned to Tennessee for a week. His parents and girlfriend, Emily Greer, said he seemed optimistic. He told them he was working on getting certified as an instructor so he could find a job, and that he was researching cave diving, with an eye toward getting that certification as well. On his nights out with Greer, he told her of plans to eventually start a diving-related business. On the weekend of August 14th to 15th, he returned to Florida, leaving behind a letter thanking his parents for the sabbatical and promising to look after them as they grew older. They never saw him again. On August 18th, the Wednesday after he returned to the Santa Rosa beach house, he went up to Vortex Spring again. In the middle of the day, he did one dive. Other divers saw him looking closely at the area around the cave entrance, as if, it was later reported, he was planning something. After resurfacing, he filled his tanks at the dive shop, a transaction recorded on security cameras. It is not known what he filled those tanks with. He spent much of the rest of the afternoon by himself alongside the spring, witnesses said, testing equipment and making notes in his dive log. The day had been hot, with temperatures around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and as evening came, Ben began preparing for another dive. He called his mother on his cell phone, the last contact he had with his family. Around 7:30 p.m., as the sun began to set, he went in again. Cronin and fellow employee Eduardo Terran, on their way back from a dive themselves, something they often did on Wednesdays after the shop closed. They saw Ben as he began descending, with his lights on and wearing a helmet, suggesting he was venturing into the cave. Terran, who had suspected for some time that Ben was forcing the gate open, went down to him and unlocked it, watching Ben go in, and then returning to Cronin. No one is known to have seen him since. On some nights when they had seen Ben dive late, the two had stayed at the spring after resurfacing until they saw bubbles on the surface, indicating that he was beginning to decompress in order to safely resurface. But on the night of the 18th, they instead went back to Terran's house for coffee. Ben's truck was still in the parking lot the next morning, but with many summer visitors coming to enjoy the site's many water-based recreational opportunities and picnic grounds in addition to diving, the employees said they were too busy to notice. They did see the truck the next morning. After determining that no one else had seen Ben, Terran called the Holmes County Sheriff's Office. Ben McDaniel was not the only person associated with Vortex Spring at the time facing serious legal issues. Lowell Kelly, who had owned Vortex Spring since 2007, was facing criminal charges. He had allegedly taken a temporary employee, who he said owed him thousands of dollars, out into an isolated wooded area and attempted to beat him with a baseball bat to make him pay up. The man escaped, and prosecutors later charged Kelly with assault and kidnapping in the incident. In 2011, Kelly ameliorated the charges against him by pleading no contest. Consequently, he was fined and sentenced to 7 years of probation. He died before the first year was completed. A Florida father and his teenage son, anxious to try out new scuba diving equipment they received for Christmas, drowned during a cave dive Wednesday, MyFoxTampaBay.com reported. Darren Spivey and Dylan Sanchez, his 15-year-old son, were last seen alive entering the Eagle's Nest sink location in Weeki Wachee, a town north of Port Richey on the state's west coast. There's a sign near the pond's entrance alerting divers that the cave is dangerous and intended for advanced divers. Spivey was an experienced diver, but his son was not certified. Neither were experienced in cave diving. The two were seen by a hunter who saw them suited up at 11 a.m. Christmas morning, and when he returned at about 6 p.m., he noticed their car was still there. After the two failed to return home, Spivey's fiancée alerted authorities. She also took a dive when she saw their car still parked near the diving location, Denise Maloney, a Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office spokeswoman said. She wasn't able to find them. We sent divers down Christmas night, and they found Mr. Sanchez at about 67 feet and Mr. Spivey at 127 feet. The two were found at about 8:30 p.m. Robert Brooks, an experienced cave diver who knew Spivey, told the Tampa Bay Times that it seems as though their deaths could have been avoided. The sad thing is, I told him, one night they're going to call me to come get you, Brooks, who worked in their recovery effort, said. Before Wednesday, at least 6 divers had died there since 1981, the most recent in 2009. The site was closed to divers from 1999 to 2003. A large green sign posted at the sink warns of the danger. Spivey tried to reassure Brooks that he was staying in Eagle Nest's entrance room, a large cavern known as the ballroom that reaches depths of about 200 feet, and not heading into the narrower tunnels. The ballroom is still a dangerous place for a diver who hasn't had professional cave training, Brooks said. King called the sheriff's office about 7:30 p.m. Wednesday. Brooks got word of the missing divers and called 2 other certified cave divers to help with the search. They acknowledged that Spivey has made some mistakes in his life. In the late 1990s, he was convicted of lewd and lascivious behavior with a child. The girl was 14, Spivey was 4 years older, and the sex was consensual, Sylvia Spivey said. the girl got pregnant and had Sanchez, Spivey was required to register as a sexual offender. In 2010, he pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of a wreck involving death after he hit a bicyclist with his truck in Brooksville. He served 2 years in prison and was released in October 2012. Despite these setbacks, Spivey raised Sanchez and was a good father to his other children, Alexis, 16 years of age, and Derek, 8, his family said. With so many mysteries and deaths surrounding this cave, and even with the vital signs telling people not to go diving, people still choose to go scuba diving in these areas. Is this an act of bravery? Is there something thrilling about this cave, or were these people just ignorant? But the most important question is, why is the cave